See it now. All right, we're all set. Thank you for bearing with us. All right. Guess we'll let Stephanie take it from here.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Maggie, does it stay like there, or do they like, is that okay?
I can.
So we can see people?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, no, that's great. Good afternoon. So, today we're gonna talk about some of the AI related stuff, and basically this workshop is really meant to focus on kind of talking about AI in the classroom and how to start having conversations about it. So if you don't know me, I'm Stephanie Pritchard. I teach in the English and Creative Writing department, and I've been doing a lot with AI over the summer and this fall as well. I joined the SUNY-wide task group on AI and helped them put together some documents that should be distributed pretty soon to our whole SUNY community. John Kane served on that task group with me as well. So, we've spent a lot of time kind of thinking about these problems or potential opportunities, really. So what I think would be great is, I know many of you in the Zoom, but I don't know everybody, and we do have some new faces here too. So would you mind going around and sort of introducing yourselves? Maybe we'll start with the rest of the people physically in the room, and then we can switch to Zoom if that's okay. John?
John Kane in the Economics Department in SELT.
I'm Maggie Schwal, CELT and Criminal Justice.
Sarah O'Shea, I'm a librarian here at Penfield.
Great, and then maybe we could switch to people online, so you can choose your order, but Mike, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Michael Murphy, like Stephanie from English and Creative Writing, and also am the coordinator of Writing Across the Curriculum.
I think I can jump in. Hello, everyone. My name is Khairul Islam. I'm an assistant professor in the communication program. So I just joined this semester. I had a fun time with Dr. John about, CCLT. And I had a chance to meet Dr. Christine here, but I don't know if I met anybody else, but good to see you here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anna Croyle. I'm in the Office of Institutional Research, and I'm also teaching a GST course this semester.
Kristen?
Hi.
Oh, it's fine.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Isabelle Bichambaritz. I'm a professor in biomedical informatics, and I'm a researcher in artificial intelligence.
And I'm Kristen Crowe. I'm the Dean in Liberal Arts and Sciences and also a psychologist.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Before we get into some of the content for today, I think it would be helpful to kind of take the temperature in the room and just see how everybody is sort of feeling about AI in or out of the classroom this semester. So I'll kind of start, and then we don't need to go around the whole room again if you don't want to, but I'll invite you all to kind of respond, if you would like. So this semester I am teaching 2 sections of English composition, which is a writing course that lots of first-year students take, but sophomores, juniors, and seniors find themselves in there also for various reasons. And then I'm also teaching a spoken word poetry class. So I have I've chosen to integrate AI quite a bit into the English composition class, largely because I wanted to kind of experiment with it and see how it would go. And then I've done a little bit in the creative writing course, but not so much, again, because this is also new. But I am really curious to see how my students start responding to the technology. I actually did an activity with them in class yesterday that I'm going to talk about in just a little bit. So I'm like curious and excited and a little bit nervous about the whole thing, I suppose. Does anybody else want to kind of share your general feelings about AI as the semester kind of gets ramped up?
I think I can go here. It seems like we teach similar kind of courses. I teach writing for PR and mass communication, so it's involved a lot of writing, and I also teach survey of public relations. So that's kind of not necessarily focused on writing, but of course, as you can imagine, communication classes heavily rely on writing issues. So today, my goal is to also learn how you all dealing AI. So when we talk in classroom, I feel nervous that, so one of the goal for this class is to prepare our student for writing. But at the same time, so we have billion-dollar opportunities like AI, generative AI that can help us to equip. So I think one of the challenges that I am having, the goal of class, so developing writing skills and having those opportunities, how to integrate that, so into the opportunities that we have in our class. So I'm just nervous. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else want to kind of talk about how you're feeling this semester, Mike?
Sure. I'll say that, Stephanie, you said, I think that you were curious and excited and nervous. I think I'm curious and nervous and excited in that order. I do feel a good deal kind of anxiety, but and I, like you, I'm introducing my first year writing students as well as students in my other classes we'll have a conversation about AI, especially, and I teach an upper division English department course, a course for literary studies majors, which involves revision of some, as one of the major projects, revision of some project they've done before. And these are people who are like thinking of themselves potentially as like future writers, professional writers of different sorts, academics and teachers. And for them in particular, I think there will be this real kind of need to be thinking about what AI does, how it will inform practice, how it will create competition for certain kinds of jobs they may, in fact, have wanted at one point to hold, but may no longer have a chance to hold. So I think it's really important for them. Though I guess part of my anxiety too comes from their lack of awareness about it and in some ways disinterest in it, as well as my own, the English 102 students seem blissfully ignorant about it. Like they seem not to want to know, they seem to think that it's something that we don't want to talk about in academia or something. Like they seem to think that they seem, again, sort of unaware of it and really to want to practice their skills as writers in a very fundamental kind of closed sense, separate from AI. So part of my anxiety, I think, has to do with this sense of how I offer this kind of introduction, which again is sort of ongoing for me. So.
Thank you. Does anybody else on Zoom have some general comments? Yeah, Isabel, thank you.
Yeah, I just something I would be interested in, because I've not started doing that, is what to add to my syllabus to explain to students that I expect most of the work to be done by them, not by generative AI. So that's and also some pointers about how to discuss that, because I'm probably not used most of the tools that they probably have available and are looking into. So I'm also curious about that, all the tools that they may use, so that I may use them as well to detect, if they are using it more than I expect. As I said, I definitely expect them to do the work on their own without the generative AI, and generative AI should be a minority of the work they produce for my classes, at least. So.
Okay, yeah, thank you. We'll talk a little bit later on about some of the syllabus statements and other things that you can have in writing. But I understand that to be a big concern shared by a lot of faculty so far. Would anybody else on Zoom like to jump in before I ask people in the room? Anybody in the room have kind of like feelings about using AI in your classes this semester or with students in general?
I've noticed it's becoming used very frequently by students in my online class, no matter what the assignment is, whether it works well or not.
Yeah.
And it is a little bit of a concern in that it is being used by some students who are asynchronous, who are just using this to avoid learning, despite qualifications I put in there and reminders I put in. I'm also really excited about the possibilities that it offers, but it is going to change, I think, the way we do assessment, at least online assessment in particular. I'm not quite sure how we're going to do it because these tools are getting more and more powerful, and there's 2 or 3 new AI tools released every week that have different capabilities.
John, can I ask you a follow-up question to something that you said? You mentioned that you like students online are using it more and more. What are some of the, I guess, like the changes that you've noticed, or perhaps like some indicators that you've noticed that might suggest that students are using AI to help them?
The quality, the structure of the writing has become much more polished in terms of sentence structure, paragraphs, elaboration, putting in numeric points with headlines for each of the topics, a very detailed background on the topic that doesn't always get to the questions that they were actually asked to address, because they're not yet very good at coming up with prompts that would allow them to address some topics, partly because some of the topics they're asked to address are not in the AI database. And many of the students have gotten feedback saying, this would be a really good response if you were asked a different question, but this does not in any way respond to the questions you were asked, because for discussions and for online assignments, I've been generally trying to give them questions that are not within the training database of the most commonly used AI tools. And so it's been kind of mixed. Student writing is better. Now, I've also noticed that students who seem to have generated their own work are also turning in better responses in terms of structure. And I think they're probably using it, maybe they're using Grammarly just to proofread and clean up some of their writing. And that's a nice thing because it makes it a little easier to understand what students are saying.
Yeah, thank you. Does anybody else in the room want to kind of like generally comment about the things you've noticed or the things you're thinking about or worried about?
I feel a bit overwhelmed by the entire thing, mostly because there are new tools that are being dropped like all the time. And I, find it hard to keep up with all of it. And also just knowing what all of its capabilities are. So, I wouldn't even call myself very familiar with ChatGPT, but that's the only one I've like attempted to dive into a little bit. And, I just know that it's going to, continue to grow. And it's something that I'm like, oh gosh, now I've got to try to figure out how to grow with it. And that feels a bit overwhelming, but also, it's really cool too. Like the AI tools are really incredible. So I think it's overwhelming, but I think it does, it is kind of an exciting, possibility.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
Yeah, I think from a librarian perspective, we're very concerned and focused on, as we are for any sort of information, the authority of where the information is coming from. And it's not often clear where it's coming from when you're working with AI, and, sending that message to students, that to question, where are they getting the information that the AI is providing them. This is a new realm for me, but I'm incredibly interested in it because it's so exciting and frightening.
So the timing of this workshop actually worked out really, really nicely. So yesterday in my English composition classes, I did like a sort of like an introduction to AI tools sort of like session, right, with the students in my classes. And I started by asking them what sorts of AI tools they were like familiar with. I didn't go into the generative AI specifically. I just wanted to get a kind of a sense of how much they knew about this already. And some of the quickest responses that I got were the new feature on Snapchat, which like will do lots of like writing type things for them, which I have to look into. And then there's another AI tool that's apparently getting a lot of attention in the media right now. You can take like a famous singer's voice and like apply it to a song that they in fact never sang. And that's getting like a lot of attention in the media right now. So those were the two examples that my students like jumped on board with. They were like Snapchat and then the singing thing. And I thought that that was really, really interesting that they went there first, right? And then of course they started mentioning like different features on TikTok and like whatever, right? So those are sort of some of the AI tools that they're really paying attention to and really keeping up with. I asked them outright, and the responses in my classes were a little bit different, which makes sense, right? But I asked them outright, I'm like, how many of you have played around with any generative AI tools? And I explained what I meant by that. And then I said, like ChatGPT. And in my first class, about 5 students out of 22 admitted that they have experimented with ChatGPT in like some shape or form. And in my second class, what was interesting is that like I prefaced the second class with, I have an account and I use this for different things. Probably 75% or more of the students raised their hands after I kind of like let them know that it was okay to tell me that, right? So I suspect that the number of students in my first class was actually quite a bit higher, but they definitely seemed scared to tell me that they had experimented with this thing. So I thought that that was a really interesting kind of, what I mean? Again, we're in a small discussion-based class, so I mean, it makes sense that they might feel a little bit nervous. But what I really want to do with them is kind of let them know that in my classes, it's okay to experiment with some of these tools through some of the guided exercises that we're going to do. And I want to make sure that they understand what's okay and what's not okay. And those are some of the things that I spent time in class kind of like talking about with them yesterday. So for example, if your students are thinking about using AI tools, and we'll use ChatGPT as like a general example, because I think that's one of the ones that they know about the most, right? And it's gotten the biggest name for itself as of right now. If they sign up and they make a free account, that box pops up, right? And it says, keep in mind some of the things that, you might be inputting into this chatbot. So think about, if you're putting in sensitive or private information. And then the last thing on that box that pops up after you sign up is, because of the nature of this, this tool, we can't really give you advice, right? Like it's not designed to give advice. It's just designed to give other sorts of answers. So I spent a lot of time talking to my students in class yesterday about like the private and sensitive information thing, especially. And we talked about, like what kind of information you could input into something like ChatGPT, and then what kind of information you should really avoid. And then how the chatbot works in general. I think it's important for them to understand how it works, because I don't think they fully do, right? I think that they think it's like a cool toy. And it is cool, but you have to understand like what you put in it and then what happens with that information, right? And then in class yesterday, I had one of my students, as they were playing around with it, he asked ChatGPT how he could make $1 million in a week. And it gave him like a really kind of like generic response, and I told him afterwards, I'm like, that's because you're kind of asking it like for advice in that way, right? And it might not give you the answer that you're looking for because of the nature of your question. And we talked about other kind of like problematic questions and things like that. So it was really interesting watching them sort of like experiment with the technology in the classroom. And I gave them a few prompts to kind of try out and see how the AI did and kind of gauge their reactions to it. But in my experience in the classroom, having some kind of like supervised playtime, like for lack of a better way to put it, it actually seemed to be really helpful for them. And some of them right away were like, I hate this. I don't like it at all. I don't like what it's saying. I don't like how it sounds. Others were really intrigued by the possibilities, but no one seemed really blown out of the water by it, which I thought was really interesting. And that was just the first opportunity we had to play with it, right? I told them that we were going to have several other class sessions coming up where we talk about other things, right? Like the sources thing, like how it can hallucinate, you know, like how it is biased, you know, like, or can be biased, you know, all of those sorts of things. So in my experience from just yesterday, I was really nervous about this class session, it seemed to be a good opportunity to sort of just let them see what it is, you know, and I do think that the number of faculty who have experimented with it is fewer than the number of students. But there, you know, it was interesting, the number of students who were signing up for accounts and everything in class yesterday. So, I suppose, you know, a good next place to go would be thinking about how to be transparent about how you feel about using AI tools in your different classrooms. So Maggie, can they see my bad outline or no? Okay.
They should be able to.
Okay, if you scroll down a little bit.
Well, it's not. Can they see this? I don't see the green.
You should be able to, yeah.
Can,
We
Yeah.
we do have it on Zoom.
can you see this document?
Yes.
Can you see what looks like a really bad outline? Yeah.
AI workshop number 2, Cell.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. There were two other things that I wanted to briefly mention that I also spent time speaking with my students about yesterday that I would encourage you to do also, you know, if you choose to have these conversations with them. The first, and this is something that I'm going to talk to them about more as the semester continues, but just making them aware of some of the bias that might be built into AI tools. And they noticed some of this yesterday as they were experimenting with it and kind of messing around. But like, for example, this is something that I read in a book I took out from the library that was called AI for Diversity, which was a really good, or AI and Diversity, and it was a very good read. I'd recommend it. It's back, Penfield has a copy of it now. But one of the examples in there was Amazon's recruitment tool that was tested just a couple years ago in 2018. Amazon was looking to hire for like tech related jobs, but historically, because tech jobs were filled by men, their algorithms actually looked at woman as a negative keyword and like rejected a whole bunch of female applicants because the AI had been programmed to recognize woman as like a negative keyword.
It wasn't so much it was
interesting.
programmed as that it
And it
learned
had
at
looked
itself
at
based
that,
on
yes.
past data, yeah.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. Yep, that was poor choice of words, but it had learned, you know, because it learns, you know, given like what it's shown, I thought that was really, really interesting.
So do you mean that it learned to privilege male applicants as a pattern?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yep. There's actually, I learned something else from that book that they were different images were being like loaded into like various AIs, and like if you put in an image of a dog and an image of a wolf and then change the landscape around it, the AI tools would recognize wolves in snow, like in snowy landscapes, but when wolves were being shown like in the summertime, it had a hard time recognizing them because more of the pictures that the AI had kind of like seen, you know, showed wolves in snowy landscapes, which I thought was really, really interesting. So it starts to like make these connections based on what's in it. Yeah. So, you know, having sort of some of those conversations with students, I think is really important. And then also thinking about, you know, like the whole academic integrity thing, which I think is going to be an ongoing conversation that we have with our students really all semester. You know, things are going to keep changing. I think if you allow your students to use AI tools in your classes, having clear guidelines are going to be really key. So for example, like last November when ChatGPT first became a thing, we didn't have ways to cite generative AI, right? But now we do. Like MLA, APA, and Chicago all have citation guidelines of how you can integrate ChatGPT or other generative AI into your written text, right? And there are academic papers that have published that cite ChatGPT or other generative AI as one of their authors, right? So there are ways to do this if you allow your students to make those choices to use that technology. Does anybody have questions or comments so far? I know I'm talking a lot. I want to make sure that I'm not skipping over things before we get into some examples of some various policies and things like that that you can include in your syllabi or on assignments. Does anybody have questions or comments so far?
Yeah, I just would like to say that, AI researchers are just as worried with what's going on than non-AI. And, a good number of AI researchers has written, famous AI researchers, a letter actually to the president to say that they were asking for a stop of any research regarding generative AI before clear legislation is set in place. We need to know when something it comes from generated by AI, we need to know that this is the case. In other words, the AI needs to identify itself as being AI. Like if people talk to the chatbot, they need to know that it's AI, and it needs to be clear, it needs to be required. So I just want to say that, the AI research is just as worried. I know the European Commission actually is preparing a very strong legislation about that, about the use of AI. And there has already been some rulings in the US also, so about, for example, copyright, only thing that have a majority, that are in majority created by human can be copyrighted, like something that's only generated by AI or in majority cannot be copyrighted. So there is something coming as well in the US, but I just want to say about that, it's not really AI against the rest of the world. I think everybody has some concern that this is going too far right now.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you brought that up. Also, I do think, and John and I were just talking about this a little bit, some of the potential changes that might be coming down the pike, right, with AI in general. But I mean, I think however it's used, right, that it should be cited accordingly, right? And so, for example, for some of the assignments in my classes this semester, because I am allowing my students to use AI to an extent with clear guidelines, right? If they are using it, I'm asking them to actually copy and paste their exchanges with the AI and put them into a follow-up assignment that I'm having them do after they submit their bigger research paper, so that I can see sort of how things kind of played out. So in addition to like actually citing it within the paper, I want to see what you're doing with it and how you're using it. Mike, you look like you want to follow up.
I was actually going to say something before, but that's exactly the practice. That in English 102, it's kind of easy because the focus is writing. So I had a similar sort of a format in mind, this meta piece where they would, write something about on the topic, but then also reflect on their use of AI, what its limits were, whatever else. I'm thinking about the ways in which they had used it, if they had used it at all. I was going to say earlier that I was really heartened. I'm not at the moment that you are in my English 102, where we sort of play around with AI. I'm planning that for a couple of weeks. I'm really heartened to hear that they were not head over heels taken with it. Part of my nervousness, honestly, is that it might be hard to convince some students that the AI, they can do some things that the AI can't, they can't just sort of like do the AI and have it be a done deal even if, even to simply to sort of like get away with it. The signal that I've gotten from most of my students so far is they seem, when we've talked about it briefly, they seem almost like a little disappointed, as if maybe I'm thinking maybe it's just my imagination, but I hope not, disappointed as if, oh, this is all college was supposed to be. I thought I would learn something. Like they did seem genuinely to honor the idea of writing kind of without the aid of artificial intelligence. And so I'm hoping that that spirit kind of, I think that's one of the things we want to cultivate, this sense of, developing a sort of a response, developing their skills as thinkers.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think, and again, it's very early, right, in the semester. So, and I'm just making some assumptions from the conversation yesterday, but, they did have some pretty interesting and really strong reactions to the technology. Some of the things that are on my bad outline, but that I didn't really bring up yet, but some of the things that the task group especially was considering is a real potential need for AI literacy for our students in the next couple of years, and what that's going to mean for them to graduate, and potentially work somewhere that is going to expect them to understand the basics of AI tools or how to integrate AI tools. So that's something that I spoke with my students about yesterday too, is, you can choose to use it or not, which I think goes for everyone, right? You can choose to use them or not use them, but you should have some idea of how some of the very basic ones work, just so that you know some of the capabilities. So let's move on to some examples of various AI policies. So Maggie, if would you mind clicking on the Boston University link? It should open up. Underneath, I hadn't originally intended to share my bad outline with everybody, but you have it now, which is fine. So those are mostly like my thoughts about some of the different policies that we kind of found, that we've found so far. So here's an example, and you all should, you can have the link to this document afterwards if you'd like. I can send it out so that you can have all the links in here. So yeah, Maggie, I'll have you stop once the students shall is fully or mostly up there. There we go. So here's some examples of what you can do. I like some of these and others I do not like so much. So I'll give everybody kind of a moment to look through the students shall one that's on the screen right now, and then we can kind of talk about some of the highlights. One of the things that I do like about this one is the number 2 piece, and number 1, giving credit to the tools whenever they're used. And then also, these are some options for faculty to consider, right? If you are using AI tools for various assignments, or if you're allowing students to do so, have encouraged students to show you the exchange, to say which tools were used. And I think that this is interesting. I'm not doing this yet this semester, but perhaps in the future, because, the various AI tools, they can all do different things, right? And if you're using, even the paid version of ChatGPT versus the free version, can't speak, the paid version can do more things than the free version can, right? And I think that it's helpful to know if students are choosing to pay for AI technology and tools, in order to get better results or not, right? An explanation of how the AI tools were used. So I think that it's 1 and 2, I think, are really interesting. I don't love number 4 for a couple of different reasons. Employ AI detection tools and originality checks prior to submission. And then there's a piece, so like on this page, there's like this students shall section, and then if you scroll down more, there's like a faculty shall section, or yeah, there we go. And it's those AI detection tools are in both of those pieces, and that's the one that I don't love so much. And I know John and I have talked about this a little bit. John, would you like to talk about that?
I wish they would turn the damn thing off here on
Yeah.
campus. That's the advice that teaching centers throughout the country have been given, because the error rates when it's not their own testing. Turnitin claims originally 99, then 98. Now they dropped it to 96 correct rate. But when other people have tested it, it's about 50% wrong in both directions. So about half of the things generated by AI are not detected as AI. And about half of the things that were not generated by AI are incorrectly flagged as being partly created by AI. So when it's wrong half the time in both directions, it's kind of a worthless tool. And it's just going to have a lot of problems of accusing people of plagiarism without any documentation or any basis for it, other than a tool that is incredibly bad. And that's only going to get worse and worse as more AI tools come out and are developed.
Yeah, I've literally taken text that has been generated by ChatGPT and put it into Zero GPT, which is supposed to be the thing that detects it, and it will say 100% human created. So, it is 100% AI created, and yet, it's. So anyways, that was kind of my first clue of like, oh yeah, this is not going to work, right? These detection tools aren't. And it's just, there's also something about like policing students' work that just also doesn't vibe well with me. I think it's something that should be in conversation, but, yeah, so I don't know. I just don't think the tools are there to actually make the claims.
One of the things that I'm going to be doing this semester, or that I have done this semester, that I would encourage everybody to think about doing, is run your assignments through various AIs and see what gets produced. For a few reasons, right? Number one, to just have an idea of what, like, if you haven't had the opportunity to sign up for a free account, I would really encourage you to do so, just so that you can see what the tools are capable of and what they can do. Yesterday in my English 102 class, like I said, I broke my students up into groups and gave them guided prompts to put into the AI. One of the prompts that I gave them was create a product and write about the pros and cons of the product in like a blog style of writing. So my students asked me, they're like, well, should we make the products or no? And I said, no. I said, put it in just like that, put it in vague and see what happens. So 5 separate computers, 5 separate students who are doing this, right? They all put in the same prompt into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT created the exact same response for all of them with small different, like it was the same, it created the exact same product for all of them. It was like noise canceling headphones. And then when they regenerated it, to see like if it would change it up or whatever, then it started getting a little bit different. But I wanted them to see that, right? And it created a really interesting conversation, for them to think about, which I think is really important. If you put in something into this, what if it produces the same thing for you that it makes for somebody else, right? And so that's why I think for us as instructors, put your assignment into the generators and see what it does, so that you can kind of see already, what you might be receiving from students. It's a good way to kind of get ahead of it without relying on something that's unreliable like the AI detection tool. Mike?
I was going to ask, how much duplication is there? Is that what I took you?
That's rare. I was gonna
fascinating.
say, that's
Happened
really
in both
rare.
classes.
Really,
It was really interesting.
but it was the same prompt,
It was the same prompt. Yep.
so it may be something specific to the training database there.
Okay.
I'm asking. I was going to say that my first experience with it were that it gave me lots of different stuff, and then I put the same prompt in and got the same response. It was about non-standard usages in grammar, and so I got a couple, maybe 3 times discussions of multiple negation, double negation in sentences, and but the first time, again, it seemed like I was getting a range of answers and that they were all different. The prose is all different, but that I've started to wonder about duplication.
It was like we tried it with, so I basically broke the class up into 5 groups, right? And every group had their own unique prompt. One of the prompts was, create a description of a picturesque natural landscape, and the AI could choose the landscape. And in that group of 5 students, 3 of them got not the exact same, but like the AI chose to write about like a lake in the mountains. And then the other 2 had other descriptions. So I thought it was really, and I mean, for all the prompts, right, they were 5 totally different ones. I thought it was really interesting how when I had all the students all lined up in a row, right, and they were saying, "Yep, I got that, I got that, I got that." It was interesting.
I wonder if they tweaked it a little bit to reduce some of the energy consumption, so that there may be some more common themes showing up. I don't know.
Perhaps, yeah. It was interesting. So anyway, whatever your assignments are, put them in and see what sorts of results you get. Like John was talking about earlier also, for different ways that you can potentially identify some things, right? Look for some things that AI tends to do, right? Like it likes to make it likes numbers. Like I get a lot of lists, right? If you ask it to write a 500-word essay, it tends to break the essay up into sections with like talking points and things. So just becoming more familiar with the kind of ways that the AI will produce text, I think is super helpful, because then it opens up doors for you to kind of have with your students just based on the way things look. Of course, your students might change everything around and then it will become harder, but I don't know, it's too early in the semester for me to see if that's going to happen or not. So this is one example. So some of the stuff here is good. I like some of the specificity, but some of the other things like the using detection tools and whatever else I don't love so much. Maggie, would you mind backing out of this one and going to another one, please? John, is it till 45?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Have one in particular?
Let's go down and do the University of Delaware. This one is big. I'll have you scroll down just a little bit. Keep going. We're looking for the numbers 1, 2, 3. There we go.
Okay.
So the thing that I like about this one, and this is a conversation that I'm planning to have in class with my students, that I would encourage you guys to have also, is thinking about, and this is something our students are going to have to adjust to unless something changes right in the foreseeable future, but thinking about how every class is going to have different guidelines related to AI. And I think our job is to tell students that, right, that there's not going to be at this time some sort of like blanket thing that covers everything. So I think that's very helpful, just like our own attendance policies and late policies and whatever else, right? Like this is going to be another kind of course policy that our students will have to sort of adjust to. So I like this example because, and you can, make this make this your own and whatever else, but I like kind of how it, it kind of approaches this in 4 general ways, right? Either in this class, you cannot use AI at all. You can use AI tools with prior permission, right? So perhaps it's identified on an assignment sheet or whatever, right? And there are clear guidelines. Number 2 is what I'm doing here and there in my English composition classes this semester. They've got very clear guidelines about how they can use the AI and where they cannot use AI. Number 3 is allow their use only if you say that you're doing it. And number 4 is like, do whatever you want, have a party, right? So, I like this because it really shows like, listen, you might be in a class that says like, no, you cannot use AI tools in here, and that's okay, because that is that instructor's choice. Or you could be in a class where you can use AI tools all the time, right? So, the other examples that I have on here have some more details also, but I think, you know, sharing something like this with students and saying like, you know, it really all depends on the instructor. It's up to the discretion of the instructor, I think is really important. I think it's important for them to understand that. Does anyone have some comments or questions, things that you were hoping we would talk about that we didn't talk about, or questions that you would like to see us address either today or in a future session within the last couple of minutes?
Well, I just would like to add, yesterday I was preparing, well, on Sunday I was preparing a quiz, and I was putting the quiz, one of the quiz questions in Google, and I was surprised that it gave, Google itself gave one result from ChatGPT, so that's what ChatGPT answer is directly, and then the rest of the answers. And so what was nice is that the ChatGPT answer was wrong. So I was pleased with that. And actually, there was not really nowhere the real answer I was expecting. So I could use this as a quiz question safely, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, I think, and again, like, depending on how, you know, it's up to all of us, you know, how much or how little we want to have these conversations or integrate these tools. In a couple of weeks, I'm planning to do something like that with the students in my classes, where they check ChatGPT for its accuracy, right? Very much like we do information literacy with the library, right? And understanding if sources are credible or not. I think that those same lessons apply to using generative AI. So I you know, if we are talking about these sorts of things with our students, then we're inviting them to ask us those sorts of questions, right? And for them to understand too, that not everything is right, you know, right away, even though it's magical and fast and like really fun, it you know, it's not all correct all the time. So that's a really good, and I think that that's a good example.
And Mike, to your point, I do think it could be, in probably in most cases, is assignment specific rather than course specific, because there are going to be certain activities that you want, you may want them engaging in, or engaging to some extent or to a lesser extent, depending on the activity. So I know, you know, I'm doing something similar, you know, as Stephanie, in that I'm providing kind of clear guidelines of when and when not to use generative AI, and, you know, having them document in a reflective piece, you know, how they've engaged with tools like that. But, you know, you know, we've all used AI in some way. When we let Gmail finish our sentences as we're writing an email, you know, there's lots of, you know, big and small ways to use it. And I think that, you know,
and Zoom will shortly be introducing a feature for people who enter meetings later that will give them a short summary of what happened before.
Wow.
It's already generating a transcript using Otter.ai, so doing an outline of that is one of the features that Otter.ai has, so that's being implemented soon.
Interesting.
I think, you know, it's the new tools are definitely, you know, kind of scaring people and such, but I think if we sort of recognize the small ways that we've used AI before, you know, I remember many times before Grammarly just begging my students and showing them in class how to use spell check, like, please just do it, use spell check, you know. And it's really, I mean, you know, these tools are more powerful now, for sure, but, you know, it's not so, you know, it's not as if we haven't engaged in these practices before. So anyways.
It's very true. I was going to say that for a long time, even now, some days stubbornly, I will type out the whole sentence when I'm in Google. when, finishes my sentence on email just because I don't. I want to insist that I guess I've said something, unique or something. Anyway, I was going to point out one of the things I really liked on the BU list, I think it was and it's kind of what you're talking about, Maggie, the list of ways in which writers might use AI, like to bounce. There was like finding some expressive language or thinking through language. There were a bunch of different sort of what struck me as all totally legitimate ways that, right. It was number 2C, I think, under students.
Yeah.
Yeah. Explanation.
Yeah.
Generate ideas, turns of phrase. Like if I have a student were using AI to sort of like generate turns, I'd be like totally delighted. That'd be great. And so I think there are, ways in which AI can be used really usefully. And I think that's part of what I'm hoping, English 102 will do with AI to make students aware of those kinds of uses of AI.
Yeah. Well, I think we're just
time.
about at the end. Does anybody have any final questions or comments, or are there things you are hoping to see in future workshops that connect to this topic? I think we have one more that's scheduled, I think from 2 weeks from now, and I think that one is on how faculty and professionals can use AI tools. So that's the last one that we have scheduled for now. But if you do think of other things, or if you'd like to have more of these discussions, please feel free to email any of us, and we'd be happy to have more.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You.